The 1990s were a golden era for automotive ambition. Manufacturers were pushing boundaries, experimenting with design, and promising cutting-edge tech to an increasingly demanding market. But not everything rolled off the assembly line a winner. So without wasting time, let's explore why they failed, through specs, reviews, broken promises, and the fallout. In 1990, Ford rolled out what was supposed to be a major evolution of one of Europe's best-selling nameplates, the Mark V Escort. Marketed as a thoroughly modern family hatchback, it featured a longer wheelbase for improved interior space and a more aerodynamic body that hinted at a new era of European design. Under the hood, it was a different story. Instead of offering all-new powertrains, Ford stuck with the aging 1.3 to 1.6-liter CVH engines from the previous generation, producing a modest 60 to 105 horsepower. Buyers could choose between a 5-speed manual or a dated 3-speed automatic. Despite strong brand recognition and initial sales success, finishing second in UK sales in 1990 and 1991, the Mark V quickly earned a bland, uninspiring, and underwhelming reputation. Automotive journalists criticized its soulless styling and cheap-feeling interior plastics, and reviewers panned the driving experience as dull and uninvolving. The car lacked the character and innovation needed to compete in a fiercely competitive compact market dominated by the likes of the Volkswagen Golf and the Opel Astra. After realizing they'd missed the mark, Ford scrambled to inject excitement into the lineup with sportier variants like the RS 2000, boasting a 2.0-liter engine and 150 horsepower. A rushed 1992 facelift tweaked the front end, slightly updating the bonnet and grille, but it was clear that deeper changes were needed. The Mark V's shortcomings prompted Ford to fast-track a complete redesign, leading to the launch of a completely reworked Escort in 1995. In hindsight, the Mark V wasn't just a misstep, it was a wake-up call for Ford, proving that brand loyalty alone couldn't compensate for a lack of innovation. In an ambitious attempt to leapfrog Chrysler's wildly popular minivans, General Motors unleashed the U-Platform Trio in 1990, the Chevrolet Lumina APV, Pontiac Transport, and Oldsmobile Silhouette. These vans looked like they had rolled straight off a sci-fi movie set, featuring sloped wedge-like designs and a sharply pointed nose that earned the nickname Dustbuster, after the handheld vacuum. Underneath, they utilized a steel space frame covered in plastic body panels, a move meant to reduce denting and corrosion. At launch, a 3.1-liter V6 making 120 horsepower was standard, made it to a 3-speed automatic, though a more powerful 3.8-liter V6 and a 4-speed auto would arrive later. GM touted these vans as futuristic and practical alternatives to Chrysler's more traditional offerings, promising better handling and more interior space. But the reality fell far short. Buyers balked at the bizarre styling, which was too radical for the conservative minivan segment. Reliability was also a major issue. Owners reported constant problems, including coolant leaks, suspension component failures, rattling interiors, and flaky electronics. While resistant to dents, the plastic panels often faded and cracked at the edges, undercutting their supposed durability. A major styling refresh in 1994 gave the Lumina and Transport more conventional front ends, but it was too late. Sales continued languishing behind Chrysler's minivans, and even GM's older boxy designs outsold them. By 1996, the experiment was over. GM retired the Dustbusters in favor of the more traditionally styled Chevrolet Venture, GMC Safari, and new generation Oldsmobile Silhouette. The U-Platform minivans serve as a textbook case of how not to innovate, proof that being different doesn't always mean being better. In the early 1990s, a bold new player burst onto the supercar scene with big dreams and even bigger specs. The Vector W8, brainchild of aerospace engineer Gerald Wiegert, was America's answer to Ferrari and Lamborghini. Built with aerospace-grade materials, including a carbon fiber and Kevlar body, the W8 looked like a jet fighter on wheels. At its core was a mid-mounted, twin-turbocharged 6.0-liter V8, delivering a claimed 625 horsepower and 630 pound-feet of torque, all routed through a 3-speed automatic transmission. It boasted blistering performance numbers, 0 to 60 in just under 4 seconds, and a theoretical top speed of 218 miles per hour. Figures that rivaled or exceeded anything else on the road. But as exciting as the specs were, the execution was deeply flawed. Journalists at Car and Driver encountered major issues during testing, including a transmission failure, overheating, and even cracked exhaust components. One owner famously reported that the rear carpet melted from exhaust heat. highlighting just how raw and unrefined the engineering truly was. Build quality was inconsistent, and the car's extreme complexity made it a nightmare to service. Only 17 units were ever produced before Vector's financial troubles led to bankruptcy in 1993. Megatech later acquired the company's assets, but the W8's reputation was already in shambles. It remains a symbol of unfulfilled ambition. An American hypercar with all the promise in the world and none of the polish to back it up. In 1994, Ford attempted to reinvent its European executive car offering with the all-new Scorpio, one of its most visually controversial cars. Replacing the conservative Granada, the Scorpio ditched understated elegance in favor of loud, Americanized styling. With its oversized oval grille and bug-eyed headlights, it was instantly polarizing. Critics didn't hold back. Motor Trend mocked it as looking like a lobotomized toad, but its taillight design was derided as it appeared to have fallen off. But underneath that bizarre exterior was a surprisingly competent vehicle. The Scorpio was powered by Ford's Cologne V6 engines, including a Cosworth-tuned 2.9-liter variant pushing out 207 horsepower. It offered a plush, comfortable ride with relatively firm handling and a well-insulated cabin, which would have made it a solid contender if only people could get past its looks. European buyers, known for their preference for sleek and restrained executive cars like the BMW 5 Series or Audi A6, were completely alienated by the Scorpio's aesthetics. Despite offering decent technology and performance, the car struggled mightily to gain traction in the market. Fewer than 100,000 units were built before Ford quietly canceled the model in 1998. With no direct successor, the Scorpio marked Ford's retreat from the European executive segment, a humbling lesson in the importance of styling, especially when trying to sell luxury. In a strange twist of automotive design, Suzuki in the mid-1990s thought the world needed a two-door SUV that looked like a futuristic toy car. Enter the X90, launched in 1995 and arriving in the US a year later. Based on the capable Suzuki Sidekick, the X90 featured a 1.6-liter inline-four with 95 horsepower, optional four-wheel drive, and a removable T-bar roof designed to offer convertible fun. Suzuki marketed it as a stylish, fun-loving vehicle for young, adventurous drivers. Instead, buyers got a car so awkwardly proportioned that it was compared to 3 cardboard boxes stacked vertically. It seated only 2, had virtually no cargo space, and rode on a short wheelbase that made handling jittery and steering feel vague. The X90 was also overweight for its modest engine, leading to sluggish performance and even overheating issues, problems already familiar from its cousin, the Vitara. It was a car that tried to be everything: a compact SUV, a coupe, and a convertible, but ended up being good at none of them. Sales were abysmal, with only 8,000 units sold in the US before it was pulled in 1997. The car became a running joke among enthusiasts and was even mocked by Top Gear as one of the worst cars ever. The X90 was less of a crossover and more of a cross mess, proof that a bold idea needs equally strong execution. After the spectacular implosion of the W8, the Vector name resurfaced in 1996 under new ownership with the M12, a more refined supercar built on the underpinnings of the Lamborghini Diablo. Outfitted with a 5.7-liter V12 producing 492 horsepower and paired with a 5-speed manual transaxle, the M12 was supposed to offer exotic thrills at a lower price point. But despite the prestigious powertrain, things quickly went downhill. The hand-laid composite shell body looked like a mashup of half-finished design cues and was often described as a canoe with wheels. Build quality was a disaster. Gaps in panels, sloppy interiors, and fit and finish issues plagued almost every example. While decent on paper, the performance failed to impress given its Lamborghini DNA. It felt slow and unrefined compared to the real thing. Only 14 units were ever built before Vector's financial situation deteriorated again. Lamborghini, which had a stake in the company through Megatech, eventually repossessed the remaining unsold cars. A planned follow-up called the SRV8 never saw the light of day. The M12 wasn't just a failure, it was a second strike that buried the Vector name for good. Cadillac introduced the Catera in 1997, a rebadged version of the German Opel Omega tailored for American roads, hoping to revitalize its image and attract younger buyers. It came with a 3.0-liter V6 producing 200 horsepower and was offered exclusively with an automatic transmission and front-wheel drive. The slogan of this car was "The Caddy That Zigs," an awkward attempt at marketing flair that failed to resonate. The car was billed as a sporty, European-inspired compact luxury sedan, but its actual performance was far from sporty. The engine struggled with the Catera's hefty weight, resulting in sluggish acceleration and lackluster driving dynamics. Reliability was its Achilles heel. Timing belt tensioner failures could cause catastrophic engine damage, leading to expensive repairs. The transmission was prone to jerky, low-speed shifts, and the build quality felt subpar for a premium brand. Sales never took off, with US numbers hovering around 5,500 to 6,000 units yearly. By 2001, Cadillac pulled the plug and started from scratch. The result was the 2003 CTS, a rear-wheel drive sedan that would eventually help reboot Cadillac's image. The Catera, meanwhile, faded into obscurity, remembered more for its quirky ads than its on-road abilities. In 1999, Jaguar entered its past to shape its future by launching the S-Type, a mid-sized luxury sedan that borrowed heavily from the brand's 1960s design language. With quad headlamps, a fluted bonnet, and a retro grille, it was a direct throwback to the original S-Type from 1963. Built on Ford's DEW98 platform, shared with the Lincoln LS, it was offered with a wide range of engines, from a modest 2.5-liter V6 to a roaring supercharged 4.2-liter V8 producing 400 horsepower in the S-Type R. The interior, laden with leather and wood trim, exuded old-world charm, but not everyone was sold on the car's nostalgic looks. Critics compared it to everything from a penguin to a bowling ball. While the S-Type drove well, especially in V8 form, it never quite matched the precision or prestige of its German rivals. Reliability remained a thorn in Jaguar's side, particularly with electrical systems and Jaguar-specific engine components. Even after a 2004 facelift introducing a sleeker front end and modernized interior, the S-Type's image problem lingered. When production ended in 2007, it was replaced by the XF, a radically modern departure that finally helped Jaguar shed its retro baggage and compete head-to-head with BMW and Mercedes. The S-Type remains a polarizing chapter in Jaguar's history, a car with style, but not quite the right kind. As the dust settled on these automotive missteps of the 1990s, the echoes of their failures linger as cautionary tales in the halls of car manufacturers worldwide. With its lofty promises of revolutionizing the road, each model stumbled into obscurity. Some replaced, others abandoned, but all etched into history as symbols of ambition gone awry. Yet in their failures, there's a strange attraction. It's a reminder that even the mightiest brands can falter. And from these ashes, new legends like the Ford Focus or Cadillac CTS rose to rewrite the story. So, which of these 1990s car disasters surprised you the most? And are there any other automotive flops you think deserve a spot on this list? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay up to date on all our latest videos.